Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton and Big C, and we bring you real sports talk every Monday through Friday from 5 o'clock p.m. hour Pacific Standard Time worldwide. Charlton and Big C. Before we even get started, we just want to let you know today is March the 21st, 2016. So welcome in spring. And also this segment is sponsored by Cadillac of Northern California. Go see your Northern California Cadillac dealers. Test drive the all-new Cadillac Escalade. It is powerful. It is luxurious. It is so choice. And when you get there, tell them that Charlton and Big C sent you. So, Big C, I know that a lot of great things happening right now in the world of sports, but something that transcends sports, President Obama going into Cuba, trying to open up the borders again, Big C.
Well, Charlton, it's a magnificent day in the world of diplomacy. President Obama is the first American president since 1928, Calvin Coolidge, to visit the island of Cuba. There's been over 50 years of sanctions from the U.S. towards this tiny island nation, and President Obama has spent the tide in bringing these two countries back together.
Yeah.
Now, this is a Latin American country, Charlton. We got Donald Trump talking about putting up a wall against a Latin American country. But I don't know if Donald Trump really understands world trade, if he understands the number of American companies that are producing goods in Mexico, such as a Ford, such as a Hershey's, such as the textile countries. Walmart brings many of their clothing out of Mexico, Charlton.
Yeah.
So Donald Trump is talking about cutting off trade in America. At what gain?
Well, speaking of Latin America, bienvenidos to our Latin American audience. And we have listeners from all over South America and as well as worldwide. But I do understand what you're saying, Big C, because whenever I'm out buying any product, I realize when we buy a lot of our groceries, a lot of the people that work in the migrant workers that work on the farms, we know oftentimes American companies bring them in here to get the free and cheap labor. And of course, everybody wants you to be legal. But to assume that everyone from South America or Latin America is not here legally, but everyone from Europe is, doesn't make any sense. I think with a lot of Cuban baseball players, they've had to come here the hard way. They made the major leagues great. In fact, a lot of African American players are no longer recruited as much as Cuban and Latin players. And with President Obama being in Cuba, I think it's more than just political. It's opening up the world of sports as well as trade, Big C.
Well, there's a sports economic behind it, Trey. Charlton, if you look at the embargo when it was placed on Cuba back in the early 60s by President John Kennedy, African-American participation in the major leagues reached an all-time high. If you look at the percentage of African-Americans, it was about 53% of Major League Baseball were African-American athletes because the Latin player no longer could freely come to the United States and play.
Yeah.
They had to seek asylum. They had to escape from Cuba's oppression, seek asylum through Mexico or through Canada to be able to get into the U.S. to join a Major League Baseball team, Charlton. Now, with President Obama's move to open up trade sanctions in Cuba and lift the embargoes that have been in place for over 5 decades, that really was unjust. Now, you think about it, Charlton. When you look at these embargoes that were laid on Cuba, where did Cuba get the missiles from? They got them from Russia.
Yeah.
Russia, a Eastern European Anglo country.
Yeah.
What is Cuba? A South American, Latin, dark-complected country.
Different shade of brown.
It was easier to put the sanctions on Cuba than what it was on Russia.
Yeah. Definitely lightning rod topic. So congratulations, President Obama, and all of our Latin American listeners. I believe that someday Dr. Martin Luther King's dream will come true, not just for United States of America, but all throughout the world. There's always been world trade. Going back thousands of years from Africa to Europe, there's always been a trade. There's always been people trading their talents. And the only way to go forward as a country, and even globally, is as the internet's made everybody so much more well-connected. And bringing in sports, because sports galvanizes everyone, unlike an election, a presidential election, no matter whether you're Democrat or Republican. We talked about the great Ronald Reagan, how great he was for the United States and the country, telling Gorbachev, tear down the wall. We have now a candidate who owns sports teams, or at least owned the New Jersey Generals, and tried to buy the Buffalo Bills and Donald Trump. And here he is telling Big C, at the same time the NFL is having an anti-violence, except for Buck Osweiler, he's telling people to knock the crap out of people at a rally, and he'll be the one that pays for your legal costs. I don't think that's what we need. And he's also a sports guy, Big C.
Well, Charlton, Donald Trump has taken a negative leadership role in running for the president of the United States, and it's been embarrassing to the Republican Party on many occasions. You think of his last couple of rallies when there's been violence in the stands. He's invoking violence from the followers, and that's not what you want in a president. We've never seen a president in American history invoking violence against other American citizens. And so this is what Donald Trump is placating now to become president. He's not talking about international diplomacy, world leadership. He's talking about strife within America. He's talking about Americans fighting Americans. And we've had enough of that over the decades. As you say with Dr. King's, I have a dream that all are created equal. Donald Trump doesn't look at that. He thinks that he and his friends are created equal, and everybody else is a subordinate to him.
Well, as long as it gets some votes, there's always someone that goes along with that. And as we transition into more competition, we talked about the debates. Whether you're Democrat or Republican, I just hope you go out and vote. When you talk about some of the lightning rod issues we touched on last week, Big C, with March Madness and the 69,000 teams that they put into the League of Exploitation, another lightning rod topic, all the free money. And I know people are saying, especially some of the great broadcasters on television, they're saying, isn't this great? We've had so many upsets happening. One thing that has not happened is any type of pay going to players. But as I always do, Big C, I like to follow March Madness when it gets around to Sweet 16. Now, I don't want to seem like I'm going against my own beliefs. I do believe that compensation should happen, just like the broadcasters. If they were asked to show up without compensations just to get a pat on the back, I doubt if they would do it. I doubt if any of the TV executives or the guys who run these conferences would show up without any compensation. And we look at the Sweet 16s, 6 teams from the ACC playing right now: Notre Dame, Syracuse, North Carolina, Virginia, Duke, and the football powerhouse, Miami Hurricanes. Big C's making a big splash, Big C, in the ACC. Can you hear me, Big C? You were talking about the ACC and how they're making a splash in college basketball, and right now we're making sure that they're getting their name out there, and they're also trying to understand that this is a situation where you're going to make good money from March Madness. And no one's saying that March Madness is bad. No one's saying that March Madness is bad whatsoever. And I know it may seem a lightning rod, but the ACC, Big C, you touched on it. They have 6 teams playing in the conference. And then what are your thoughts on how they look strong as a conference, especially compared to the Pac-12?
Well, Charlton, when you think about the ACC, they've always been a perennial power come the NCAA tournament.
Yes.
And with the expansion of the ACC a couple of years ago, you added Syracuse, you added Notre Dame, and those teams have made the tournament, Charlton.
Yes.
But when you think about 6 teams from a conference, that's an unprecedented number of teams, which has to give the ACC odds-on favorite to win March Madness this year. But, I mean, all of those teams are great teams. And when you get down to, as you say, the tournament beginning with 16 teams, this is when everybody gets excited, Charlton.
Well,
and, you know, we talked about everybody brackets. There's not one bracket out there right now that was on the beginning brackets that's good.
Well, another thing, too, because I know we talk about equity and how a lot of these players, they come from the East Coast, and you have so many upsets, I believe, because a lot of the other Division I colleges, no longer is it just going to be Kentucky or a Indiana or a UCLA that's getting the top players. You do have some smaller programs that are able to knock off the bigger programs. Michigan State losing in the first round, that's kind of a shock to a lot of people, but not necessarily to the players that don't get chosen by a Michigan State, but they're able to go on to other programs and win. And one more thing about Pac-12 basketball. We know that right now Oregon's known as a football school, I believe, Big C. But because Coach Knight, Coach Phil, Uncle Phil, as you call him, he's pumped so much money into that program, they're in one of the smaller TV markets in the Pac-12. They're not Los Angeles.
Corvallis, isn't that up in Corvallis?
They're up in Eugene, Oregon. No, not a media market like the Bay Area, not a media market like Seattle, not a media market like Los Angeles of all places. Oregon, I'm impressed with how they've come on as a program. Even Oregon State has won 2 baseball national championships in the past 5 years.
Well, Phil Knight, after Oregon State won the national championship in baseball, Charlton, built an on-campus baseball venue for that team. They weren't able to play on campus prior to winning 2 national championships, but Phil felt that he should donate to both universities, and he's been a great donor to the state of Oregon as far as education and athletic venues for the kids over the decades.
Well, not only has he done a great job, he also gave, I believe, $100 million to Stanford Athletic Department. So when you have, and this is one thing I'll say great about him, I know he owns Nike, but when you think about people who actually give back, now sometimes we get on these universities, Big C, for giving money to the athletic departments, but oftentimes kids can't get jobs and they're playing for free. When you can donate $100 million to an athletic department, how can we find a way to get players, some players paid? That would be something that I hope that can be a lightning rod conversation coming up. Could you see any type of, could corporate help out do that as well?
Box. And, as we talked about in our last episode, they should look at college baseball, college football, college basketball, just like Major League Baseball does.
Oh, yeah.
You're allowed to draft players in major leagues.
Yeah.
If you don't sign them that first year, they still have that eligibility to go ahead on and go to college and further their education and also play college baseball. Now, that's something that the NFL and the NBA should look at. We know, we've talked about the University of Kentucky, a lot of one-and-done players, Charlton. And so they're wasting 6 to 7 months in college saying, hey, I'm not going to be here. I'm not going to go to class. Why not allow these players to sign a contract with a pro team coming out of high school? And if they sign a contract with a pro team coming out of high school, then they're going to have to be obligated to at least 2 years in college, if not 3 years in college. That's only going to improve the college game, Charlton, across the board, as well as allow these players to hone their physical talents as well as their social talents, which they sorely need once they go pro.
As you say, they go to class. At some point in time, I've started to think that Kentucky doesn't have a college. They just have a minor league basketball program. That's what it seems. I know Calipari doesn't like that, but that's what it seems. And also, as we speak about what people like, if you get the chance to drive a car, you have to go drive the BMW, the ultimate driving machine. Not only can you pick from the 1 Series, the 3 Series, the 4, the 5, the 6, the flagship 7 Series, they actually have unveiled at the New York Auto Show, Big C, the flagship M7. The M7, like the M5, over 600 horsepower, and has every technological feature you can find. Michael Strahan, former NFL All-Pro, he likes that, but he was on the Michael and Kelly Regis show. But I'm telling you, that car is definitely the ultimate driving machine. Twin turbo, all-wheel drive. Your 750 BMW is great, but test drive the M7 and tell them that Charlton and Big C sent you.
Well, Charlton, you're talking about 750. You said 600 horsepower.
600 horsepower.
I don't have that much grass in my yard to feed 1 horse. There's all 600 of them.
Well, it's definitely a lightning rod of a car. And speaking of lightning rods, we know about the Legion of Boom. We talk so much about the NFL, Big C. Richard Sherman had a few things to say about Roger Goodell. I guess something about Roger Goodell trying to make gestures about peace. And what is his thoughts on, Richard Sherman's been a lightning rod of a player, but also Goodell, they don't really see eye to eye lately, Big C?
Well, Goodell is talking about Charlton adding the yellow card, such as they do in soccer. That if you get 2 personal foul penalties, you're out of a game. Now, we go back to the Super Bowl. Talib, the cornerback
for the Broncos.
For Denver. Had 2, if not 3 personal fouls in the first quarter, intentional. And that changed the tempo of the game when those things happened, Charlton, because he knew the penalty wouldn't be that great. But it's a mental intimidator to your opponent. Now, Sherman said Goodell is never, all he is a suit. He's never put on a football uniform, so he doesn't understand what it takes to get a personal foul penalty. Now, I kind of agree with Sherman on that perspective of the game. It's hard to have someone to police you all the time who has never walked in your cleats. Now, Jerry Richardson, the owner of the Panthers, is the only owner, Charlton, that can sit in the owner's meeting and talk about football from a player's and an owner's perspective, because he's a former player with the Baltimore Colts back in the 50s and 60s. The rest of the owners have just been rich guys that have bought a toy.
Well,
but the game of football is violence.
Yeah.
The modern day gladiator is what football is. I don't care how much you try to make football safe in its modern confinements.
Yes.
It's going to be a dangerous game. They're going to have to expand the field, Charlton. They're going to have to add another 10 yards in width, maybe another 10 to 20 yards in length. Players have outgrown the playing surface, Charlton. If you think about the NFL,
Yeah.
it was the same playing surface that you had in the 40s when you had an offensive lineman that weighed 215 to 220 pounds.
Yeah. Now you have...
At 215 to 20 pounds now, you're a wide receiver.
Yeah, and a small one at that, because we know they have guys that pack about 230, 240 pounds. But also, Goodell, when you bring his name up, we know that $44 million comes up. They have the issue with Concussion, the great movie that Will Smith portrayed in with Dr. O'Malley. Now, we know that the issue of the yellow card for the NFL, the same way they do with soccer. And I still go back to the fact that we have a quarterback, Brock Osweiler, just leaving Denver, being picked up by the Houston Texans, pushing a woman. I think it's so disingenuous that we talk about protecting people, Big C.
That night, Brock Osweiler would have got 2 yellow cards. So he would have been disciplined. He would have been suspended. He pushed the woman twice, Charlton, not once, twice. So that deems 2 yellow cards, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think it would mean 2 yellow cards, and it's such a serious issue because what are you showing young boys when... I remember one of the great commercials, Mean Joe Green, when he drank the Coca-Cola, and he was walking...
I remember that vividly, Charlton.
Yeah, walking through the tunnel, and that little boy approached him and says, Mean Joe, are you okay? He's like, yeah, I'm good, kid. And the kid was kind of down because Mean Joe Green was his favorite player. Well, Mean Joe Green, it was just a commercial, but I think it's so powerful because Mean Joe Green realized that this young kid, he's looking up to athletes. He turns around and tosses his jersey to the kid because the kid gave him his Coca-Cola. So if you contrast that Mean Joe Green with what Brock Osweiler's doing. Now, Mean Joe Green's a Hall of Famer, played for the Steel Curtain. There was no tougher defense than the Steelers that won 4 Super Bowls in 6 years. However, from a guy to be called Mean Joe Green, never got into any kind of trouble that I understand, and we transition to the modern day athlete in the commissioner that says nothing when a man 6'7", which is taller than Mean Joe Green, is pushing a woman, but they want to implement a yellow card for football. What happens to protect your fan base? Half the fans that cover NFL football are 10. They're women. I don't see any talk about it, and I'm still going to keep bringing it up until someone acknowledges that because it's given too many athletes the green card to go ahead and do the same thing, Big C.
Well, Charlton, as you look at mainstream media, they do not touch on it because they're trying to protect themselves. They're not trying to protect the public. And that's part of what their job is. They're serving an injustice by sitting on television, by sitting behind a mic on radio and lying about what we've seen and what we've heard.
Yeah.
You have to be honest in life and at times when you're in business.
Yeah.
And that's what they're obligated to do, is tell the truth. None of them wanted to hide behind Ray Rice. Oh, yeah, he struck her.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, they all buried Ray Rice.
And they were both on tape. They were both on tape,
but they're both egregious acts, Charlton.
Yeah.
But when you look at it, one is Osweiler, coming off of a Super Bowl winning team that he sat on the bench and watched the game like many other players, but he got $75 million for doing it.
Yeah.
Ray Rice had came off of a Super Bowl winning team also, but he lost his career.
Yes.
Behind this. Now, Goodell used double indemnity on Ray Rice.
Yeah.
He suspended him for 2 games, said he never saw the tape, which Roger Goodell had the tape from day one.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
He lied about that. I'll straight up say it. Roger Goodell lied about that. If he didn't have the tape, then he's the dumbest man in football.
Well, you know,
plain and simple.
You know,
let him show that didn't happen.
Well,
but then he's going to come back and use double indemnity.
Yeah.
He's convicted the guy once, came back and convicted him a second time, cost him his career, Charlton.
Well, you know, I've been on the same television production crews with Michelle Tafoya back in the 90s, Pam Oliver when she was at Fox, Alex Flanagan, you see her now covering football, and then Lauren Sanchez, who also used to work with Fox, with John Madden and Pat Summerall's team. So I say this because women are the face of a growing opportunity to get into professional sports. There's so much pushback on women doing anything. I think even Serena Williams there was a comment that some tennis sports person made about women having to get on their knees to please men, and that looks are more important than your accomplishments. We're talking to Billie Jean King, and we've heard of Anna Kournikova having she tested positive for some type of banned substance. But I just hate to see so many times when men get away with doing anything to hurt women, because I have a daughter, I have a wife, I don't want anything happening to them. And for the men that say, yeah, he only pushed her, okay, go push Ndamukong Suh's wife, go push Roger Goodell's wife, go push Roger Goodell's daughters, and say, hey, it's okay because he didn't really hurt her, he didn't punch her, it was just a push. I don't think there's any tolerance for that, Big C.
There's no tolerance, Charlton, but that's that double level of acceptance in American society. If you're a rich white quarterback, more is tolerated from you than anybody else in society or in sports.
Yeah.
Because we've seen the level of athletes that have been suspended for acts against each other, not acts against the public, Charlton, but for acts against each other. The egregious acts that will take place. Ndamukong Suh has, on a couple occasions, been suspended for acts within the game.
Yeah.
As violent as the game is,
but at least he
hit suspended for acts within the game as well as other players.
But he hit other men.
We talked about Latrell Sprewell being suspended for acts within the game in a practice situation. Not in a game, in a practice situation. So it's looked at differently. And I look at the two leagues, the two major leagues, the NBA and the NFL. They both have new commissioners over the past couple of years.
Yeah.
And these commissioners have let the violence level in both of these games go undaunted. I mean, we've never seen players at the level that they've been in the past couple of years as we've seen in the NBA, Charlton.
Yeah.
And especially in the NFL.
Well, in Madison Square Garden, just over the past couple of days, DeMarcus Cousins out of the Sacramento Kings, he actually pushed an official on the court. Now I hear some of the local media people saying, well, wait a minute. He didn't hit him. It was only a push. I think people are making a mountain out of a molehill. But see,
Charlton, there's no contact with an official. The official is completely out of bounds with the player. You do not touch an official at any point in the game. And when that situation occurs, that should be a 5 to 10 game suspension. At some point, Adam Silver needs to serve notice to the players and the entire league. These things will not be tolerated. They're in the bylaws, but he's tolerating them, Charlton.
You know the movie, the great movie, when we talk about Hollywood, how it contrasts with sports, Officer and a Gentleman, we had Richard Gere and Lou Gossett Jr. Could you imagine if we defend some of these athletes the way, if they were to behave that way in the military? I mean, could you imagine? Because I think the bad thing that's happened, we talked about Mean Joe Green, how great he was, even though he's considered very scary on the football field, but a teddy bear off the football field. We've come so far now that we're saying as long as you don't punch somebody, like the Osweiler thing, then it's okay. I just think that sends a really bad message to our women who are all over college campuses, even in their own homes. How can you feel safe when these TV talking heads now are saying, well, it wasn't a hit, it was just a push? I think that's a horrible message to send. And Goodell with his yellow flags, I think he deserves to get the first yellow flag. And speaking of yellow flags, Big C, as we get this next segment going, this segment is sponsored by your local Northern California Ford dealer. If you're looking for a truck, none other than the F-150, one of the most reliable trucks that Ford has ever built. They build it Ford tough. If you go down and see it, tell them your guys, Charlton and Big C, told you to go down and take a test drive. Speaking of test driving cars, Big C, I know that you love NASCAR down in the South coming in from the East Coast. Jimmy Johnson got a 77 Sprint Cup victory, passing the late Dale Earnhardt. What a great story he's been, Big C.
Well, Jimmy Johnson's been one of the more consistent drivers in the sprint car races, Charlton. And, you know, as the weather turns to spring and summer, that's when sprint car racing really takes off, especially down here in the South.
Yeah.
Now, he has his eyes on Jeff Gordon's all-time victory record of 93.
Yeah.
Now, that may be a little bit of a stretch, you know, reaching Jeff Gordon, who is one of the great historians in NASCAR racing.
Yeah.
But, you know, you have to take your hats off to Jimmy Johnson to be able to stay at it for so long and to pass the great Dale Earnhardt that we lost several years ago.
Yeah.
But NASCAR is at an all-time high, Charlton. It is one of America's thickest sports as far as spectators that you'll ever see.
Well, you know, we talked about Smokey and the Bandit when we had the great Jackie Gleason and Burt Reynolds and Sally Fields were also in that movie. I don't know what happened to the black Trans Am, but that was a car. Obviously, you're not supposed to drive 105 miles per hour on the highway unless you're on the Autobahn in Europe. But just back to, I think, Big Daddy Don Garlett, some of those guys, was it Richard Petty, A.J. Foyt? Those guys, when I was a little boy, I would always watch these great drivers, and they have NASCAR driving is really big in the South. I think it's a great way to let people understand. We talked about the BMW having a 600 horsepower M7. It's great to have a car that you can drive that fast, and it's controlled environments, Big C.
It is, Charlton. And you think about the safeguards that NASCAR has put in to protect their drivers over the years, Charlton. I mean, this is one of the safest high-endurance events that you could ever be in is NASCAR. But, you think about it. Everyone loves to drive.
Yes.
Who would not want to drive at 220 miles an hour down a straightaway?
Well, I'm telling you, when you think about it, next time you're in front of a judge about speeding, how can you not drive fast when your car has 600 horsepower? And as we transition into this next segment, Big C, I want to just tell people something's going on in our society. Now, I love Hulk Hogan. I used to love watching him wrestle. But how does he get $115 million, an award for a sex tape that's, think about this. He's awarded $115 million for making a sex tape with his best friend's wife. Okay? If that's your best friend, what do you do with your worst friend? And to contrast that, $115 million for having sex with his wife's his best friend's wife. Tiger Woods was accused of certain things, never even on a tape, but he lost $100 million in sponsorship. What the world is going on, Big C?
Well, maybe he's friends with Donald Trump talking about his big unit and all that, But maybe we brought some politics into the courtroom when you think about that, Jonathan. But, we had the case with Erin Andrews a couple of weeks ago where she was rewarded $55 million by a jury.
Yeah.
And I guess they're saying size matters because Hulk Hogan's a lot bigger than she is.
Yeah. So
they basically doubled his award, and he's going to go back into court again next week, Charlton, where they're looking at punitive damages. So he can be even awarded more. Now, I'm trying to figure out how was Hulk Hogan damaged by having a sexual relationship with his best friend's wife. I mean,
what about his best friend?
Opening the door for America. Everybody goes out, let's have an affair with my best friend's wife, and I can get paid.
There's a book called Melbourne. It was John F. Kennedy's favorite book. It's about Lord David Cecil and the aristocratic society of England. It's how people really live outside of the make-believe that people do. Everyone should go out and get that book. But when you think about it, Pam Anderson, I remember she made a movie way back in the day. She never got $115 million. I think her and Tommy Lee wanted people to see it. Kim Kardashian, with a guy named RJ, I believe, she started her career that way. She's made, I think, $200 million last year. So is that the way of the new world, is to go do something sordid and put it on a tape and people make you millions?
In society, sex is always sold. I mean, Playboy live forever selling sex.
Yeah.
And now with the internet, everybody's out there, and you don't need a magazine. It's instantaneously. You go out and make a movie, put it on the internet. It's a success. No one knew who you were before.
Yeah.
But afterwards, everybody's aware of you.
Well, I think Hulk Hogan has sent a bad message to everyone that has a male friend. Because, and I know it's an uncomfortable topic for some people, but we're all adults here. It's one of the most common things that people do as consenting adults. However, I mean, if you do something with your wife's best friend, if they consent to it, whatever makes you happy. This is not Amsterdam, but it could be. I just think the court system, when you have people not even being awarded $1 million for being assaulted, but you have someone who's showing their intimacies on tape, it doesn't make sense. There are even people in the adult industry that don't make that kind of money, and they do it consensually for a lifetime. So, I mean, it's just a bad message to tell people, if you have a wife, don't let her hang out with your best friend, especially if he's a wrestler. But it has to make you laugh. And because Hulk Hogan, who made a lot of money by weightlifting, right? He's all natural. Right?
He don't have any hair on his head. How you gonna have the natural? You gotta have hair to have the natural.
He's more natural, his weightlifting, to build his body that big than even the great, incredible Hulk. But in the last few minutes, Big C, and our show goes by so fast, and I don't mean to offend anyone by talking about sex. It is an adult show, but I would just do it safely if you can. But be careful when you have your wife around your best friends, because Hulk Hogan and he's going to get rewarded. How many more men are going to go out and try to follow in his footsteps, Big C?
Well, there's many neighbors right now looking through blinds and saying, "Hey, what are my chances?"
Remember the great Archie?
Scenario.
Remember the great Archie Bunker?
Well, you remember the theory, Peeping Tom. I mean, all the Toms are showing up tonight.
Yeah, but I think about Archie Bunker and when the Jeffersons moved in. I believe when the Jeffersons moved in, and we had moving on up to the east side. When you think about back in the day, how we made a lot of fun of people and how they tried to bridge differences in society. But Hulk Hogan has taken friendship to a whole new level. I can understand maybe it goes on more in Hollywood, but Middle America too.
Well, Charlton, there used to be a show on TV called Bosom Buddies.
Yeah.
That's what he's become.
I heard that. I mean, even Three's Company, Jack Ritter, the great Jack Ritter, man. I'll tell you, Big C, this always goes by too fast. It's already time to come to a close. But I want to tell you, we've had some lightning rod conversations. We also have a lot of fun. We talk about some of the great actors that have been involved in sports. We talked about race car driving. We talked about golf. There's always NFL football. There's Roger Goodell. There's so many big things, Big C. But in the last 30 seconds before we close out, what are your thoughts? Anything you want to share, Big C?
Well, I'm looking forward to the Sweet 16 this weekend, Charlton, kicking off. It's a great time for basketball. We're also looking at the NBA. We came off a marquee game this past weekend where Golden State went into San Antonio
for the
33rd consecutive time. Came out with a loss. That's the longest streak of any team in the NBA. You think about it. As great as Golden State has been over the past three years, Charlton, they've lost 33 consecutive games in San Antonio. And so when they talk about home court matters in the NBA playoffs, it really does.
Well, I believe that home court matters, but also friends matter. So, men, don't let your friends drive home drunk, but definitely don't let them drive home with your wife. So we'll bring you more of Charlton and Big C. This is Real Talk. We'll do it every Monday through Friday at the 5 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time, worldwide on Charlton and Big C. We are Talking Sports, and we wish everyone a super fantastic day. Catch you tomorrow.